What a day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory. Let us then be true and faithful, trusting, serving every day. Just one glimpse of Him in glory will the toils of life repay. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory. Onward to the prize before us, soon His beauty will behold. Soon the pearly gates will open.
Get to, there we go. So back in verse 9 of chapter 19, they said, stand aside. Furthermore, they said, this one came in as an alien, and already he's acting like a judge. Now we'll treat you worse than them. We'll stop there in just a moment. He was, I think some translations say sojourner, where the New American Standard Bible said alien there. It didn't matter how long you stayed in one of these lands. Most of them allowed sojourners in the land. It didn't matter how long you stayed. You were always considered a sojourner if you were not of the nationality of that nation. Lot was not from that area, and so he was a foreigner. And basically they're saying, look, you're an outsider, and already you've set yourself up to judge us and to determine what we can do and what we can't do. We'll treat you worse than them. I have no idea exactly what that means, but I suspect that ultimately it means that they intend for Lot to be dead. So they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break the door. I don't know how much pressure that they must have brought to bear, but large crowds like that, I mean, people get crushed in large crowds like that. So there was a big press against Lot. And this is the interesting thing. Now, Lot is trying to do what? Why is Lot even standing out there talking to these people? Yes. Genesis 19, verses, well, we're around verse 10 now. Why did he even step outside to address this crowd? What's his goal? He's trying to protect the people that are under his charge, these visitors that he has shown hospitality to. Ironically, we're going to find out that what happens is the exact opposite. Lot doesn't protect them, they protect Lot. And so what it says is the men, that's speaking of these visitors, reached out their hands, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves trying to find the doorway. And so they had an exercise of power that was demonstrated here as well. What comes along with a situation like this? Okay, just assume you've got this huge, massive mob, because that's what's described in this text. They are here for nefarious purposes to begin with. Now they're angry and they want Lot. And so you've got a large angry mob. What normally happens when you get large angry mobs? Is it controlled? And what do we say? It's a riot. Now throw into that mix that these same people who are angry and who are in this riotous mindset are blind, immediately struck blind. What do you think that effect does that have on these people who are already angry, not in their right mind, not thinking clearly, and now all of a sudden they can't see to boot? We got complete chaos here. Absolute chaos. There's confusion. That they are not far from the door of the house. They're pressing against Lot at the door of the house, but it says that after they're struck with blindness, they wearied themselves trying to find the doorway. So they can't see. They can't even find the door that's right in front of them. And the men said to Lot, "Whom else do you have here?" "A son-in-law. And your sons and your daughters and whomever you have in the city, bring them out of the place. For we're about to destroy this place, because their outcry has become so great before the Lord that the Lord has sent us to destroy it." And Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, and said, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city." But he appeared to his sons-in-law to be jesting. Now, what's the thrust of this? Right. I don't think that the idea is for us to think that they thought that Lot was doing a stand-up comedian routine and was joking when it uses that word jesting. I think it means that they just didn't believe that he was serious, that this was a real thing that was going to happen. Now, put yourself in their shoes for a minute. We tend to look at characters like this in the Bible and say, well, how could they be so foolish? Okay, I have to assume that they weren't part of the crazy mob. These are not men who were there and witnessed all that event. They didn't witness these men striking this mob blind. What if someone came to you and said, "Hey, you need to pack up and leave now. We got to get out of here because there's just two guys that said they're going to destroy the city"? What would you think if someone told you that? Yeah, they're not going to believe it. I mean, I wouldn't believe if I don't know. We'll use my son-in-law. My son-in-law came to the house and said, "Hey, you got to get out of here. The city's about to be burned down." I would go, yeah, okay. I think you're probably overestimating things a little bit. It's not going to be, And by the way, he's even in law enforcement, and so he might have some information about something that's going on that I don't have. I still would think that that's an overblown scenario. The idea of an entire city being destroyed, that's not a common thing that we see. By the way, not even in the middle of wars where big bombs are being dropped do you tend to see entire cities destroyed. The only time I know that entire cities were destroyed was back in World War II, when we dropped atomic bombs on a couple of places. And that hadn't happened since then. And so usually you don't get that kind of just absolute, total, widespread destruction. And I think that's the implication here, is the sons-in-law just thought that he was kind of worked up and kind of making more out of this than it really was, and that things would be okay. So they don't listen. And morning dawns, verse 15. The angels at this point urge Lot, saying, take your wife, your two daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. Now, I'll also mention this. The sons-in-laws that it mentions in verse 14 were betrothed to his daughters. And I think from the text, I'm assuming that they're betrothed to the two daughters that were still in Lot's house. Now, I don't know if he had other daughters. It certainly lends itself to that, because when they spoke to him in verse 12, your sons and your daughters and whomever you have in the city, there's no mention of the sons being anywhere around, right? So they're clearly not in his house. What happens to Lot's sons? They're destroyed in the city. What about, is it possible that he had other daughters? It's possible. We don't know how many he had, but we know that there were two in the house. So morning dawns, and what there is there's Lot and his wife and two of his daughters that are actually at the house, and they say, okay, we have to go now. You got to go right now. Just take the people that are here and get out. But he hesitated. So the men seized his hand, and the hand of his wife, and the hands of his daughters, for the compassion of the Lord was upon him, and they brought him out and put him outside the city. Okay, so there's a couple of things we want to note. We've been noticing over these last two chapters the patience of God, right? God dealing with Abraham, he was very patient with Abraham. We are seeing that again here. We are seeing hesitation and the unwillingness to move as quickly and urgently as the urging is being given to Lot. And God's being very patient. And in fact, he's so patient and then extends that beyond patience to actual mercy, in that when Lot hesitates at the end and doesn't actually leave, God has these messengers take him by the hand and physically walk him outside of the city.
Yeah, I ain't even going to go that far.
Well, it's going to get interesting. He's going to get some instructions. They get outside of the city, apparently outside the city gates, and the angels let him go and then give him some instructions. Did you have a question or comment? The same reason any of us would. He has people that he knows, and a house and stuff and servants and all kind of things that are still in the city. You got to keep in mind, we've talked about this. Why did Abraham and Lot separate? He had too much stuff and too many people. They were starting to fight with each other. Lot had a bunch of servants. Lot had children. Lot had a huge group of people that were under him, that worked for him, that were associated with him, that are all living in this area. And how many of them are at his house? His wife and his two daughters. There's three of that huge entourage that he travels with that are actually there. I'm sure he's concerned about the well-being of all these other people, about his servants, about his sons, about his future sons-in-law, that he has not yet successfully talked into leaving. So he hesitates. I would hesitate leaving my stuff behind. Now listen, people do it all the time. There were thousands of people got trapped in New Orleans after they were told you need to evacuate in 2005, right? Why? How did they get trapped? Because they hesitated. My mom's going to watch this and I'm going to get in trouble, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Several years later, the hurricane that came in that flooded and destroyed their home over in Texas, for days before that hurricane got there, I told her, look, this is bad. Y'all need to leave. Y'all need to leave. They had traveled away for several hurricanes before that. It was not easy for them to travel away, especially with the health condition of my stepfather. It was an ordeal. By the time they decided to leave, it was waking up in the middle of the night with 3 feet of water in the house. And it was too late. They hesitated. And so, that's what we do. Even if we think we need to leave, we want to wait until when? Till you have to. And so he's hesitating because all of this stuff, and it's got to be overwhelming. Everything that's happened over the night that just transpired, these are not normal events for anybody. And so he gets drug out of town. They came about when they brought him outside that one said, "Escape for your life."
There's another good lesson in that too. The hesitation that they did. Well, you warned your parents. That's a little different from being warned from God.
It is.
But he still hesitated. We also have a warning from God. We still hesitate.
Sure. And that's nothing new either. How many times did the prophets of God ask people questions like, how long will you hesitate between two opinions? Choose who you're going to serve, God or... You can't keep one foot on one side of the fence and the other foot on the other side of the fence, and all that is hesitation. And this is a great model for that. Escape for your life. Look, this is urgent. And this is about your life. That's what he says. But has anything happened yet? Nothing's going on yet. I'm telling you need to get out here because you're going to die if you don't leave. It's just another day.
Well, the only thing that happened that would have put a lot of belief in should have, anyway, when they landed home.
Well, it certainly showed that they had some authority from somewhere, right? And some power. Do not look behind you. This is how urgent this is. Look, don't look behind you. Don't stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains, lest you be swept away. But I'm going to talk about my stepdad again because he was famous when I was a kid for telling us there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He didn't want us to ever say, well, if, or when he told us to do something, but. No, he didn't want to hear it. That's exactly what Lot says. I don't know, my lords. Behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you've magnified your loving kindness, which you have shown me by saving my life. See, he's already starts off by expressing his gratitude for the deliverance from the night before. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. That's too far away. What happens if I'm trying to get to the mountains and this calamity comes and I get caught up in it? That's too far away. Behold, this town is near enough to flee to, and it's small. Please let me escape there. Is it not small? That my life may be saved. So instead of doing what he's told and just running for the mountains, he says, well, it's a long way away. And this place is closer. And it's a tiny little place. It's not as bad as Sodom. It's just a tiny little place. Can't I go there and be saved there? And we're talking about patience and mercy. Behold, I grant you this request also, not to overthrow the town which you have spoken. Okay, you know what? Yes, I will let you go there. I will deliver and save that town. Now, I want you to, this is important in a minute. Probably won't even take us a minute to get there, but it may. So just keep this in mind, that he actually bargains with God and says, well, I don't want to go to the mountains. That's so far away. Let me go to this place instead. And God says, okay, I will protect you and save you in that place. So get to that place. Hurry, escape there. I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the town was called Zoar. Apparently, the word Zoar means little place. So the name was changed to little place. The sun had risen over the earth when Lot came to Zoar. And so the sun's come up now. It's apparently in the mid part of the day. The sun is now over the earth. The Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. So understand, we're talking about widespread destruction. Sodom was a large city. Gomorrah was a sizable city. There are lots of other little small cities in this valley, and then there's the whole valley, and they grow their crops there. There's the cropland. There's all of this habitation, and the whole valley is what is the subject of this destruction. Except for this one little town that sits in the middle of it all, Zoar. It's protected and spared. So, again, we want to put ourselves in Lot's shoes for just a moment. Now, these two men have just saved me from an angry mob that's wanting to kill me. They've warned me about the destruction that's coming. They have been very patient with me in dealing with my hesitation. And they have physically led me outside of the city and told me exactly what I need to do. And I said, yeah, but I don't really want to do that. You're asking more than I want to do. Can I do this instead? And they were so kind as to say, yes, we'll protect you there. Go there. Just get there quickly. And he gets there, and here comes the sulfur and the fire raining down out of the heavens, and everything is destroyed. As far as you can see. From this set of mountains to that set of mountains where this valley lay in between them, everything you can see in this valley is consumed in fire, except for this one little city. There's one little note that we want to pick up in verse 26 before we get to the application of that. But his wife from behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Did they mean it when they said, but don't look back? Yeah. But that seems like such a small thing. Do you know that in, Luke 17? Luke 17:32, I think, is the place where we're told, remember Lot's wife. There's a few congregations in the country that put signs up by the clock in the back of the building that say, remember Lot's wife. So that when members look over their shoulder to see what time it is, they also see a sign that says, remember Lot's wife. Don't look back. So now he's lost his wife too, right? He's lost all of his possessions. He's lost his house. He's lost his flocks. He's lost his servants. He's lost his family with the exception of a wife and 2 daughters. But now his wife's gone too. So now there's just 3 of them. How bad was it? Abraham rose early in the morning and went to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land ascended like the smoke of a furnace. Now I want to stop here. I'm going to have to actually go up here for just a second because I have this slide hidden. I want to pull up the map. Once again, because I do want us to remember. Come on. There we go. That purple box, that's where Abraham is. That pink box, that's where Lot is. Sodom and Gomorrah, and this valley's down here. How big of a fire had to be burning for Abraham to see it from Hebron? If this is the area that's on fire. So I want you to get some scale in your mind about how just widespread and massive this destruction is. This is no small thing. This is a big deal. Thus it came about, verse 29, when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. And Lot went up from Zoar. Okay, so that's the little town that he's gone to. But he went up from Zoar and stayed in the mountains. Where had Lot been told to go to begin with? Go to the mountains. Now, that's too far away. Can't I just go here? Now all of a sudden, the scale of the destruction is laid out before him, and what does Lot do? He runs to the mountains. What does that tell us about what happens? Lot becomes afraid. And he wants to get as far away and as safely away from this event as he possibly can. Now, I want you to keep in mind that he has been delivered by these two men outside of his door, and they struck the entire mob blind, and he witnessed that. They have brought him out of the city. They have told him what to do, and then they have told him, okay, God has granted that you can go to Zoar and you can stay in this little place and he'll deliver you there, but make sure you get there. And that's exactly what happens, and still he doesn't feel safe in the place where the power of God has been promised he will be saved. There's some lessons in that as well. For a lot of people who depart, for instance, the Lord's church, the place where God has said, if you will be in Christ, there's salvation. In the body of Christ, there's salvation. And yet people still leave the body of Christ because this happened or that happened. So-and-so did that. And so I bail on God. What makes me do that? Fear. Fear makes me do that. That's what is his motivation as well. Lot went up from Zoar. He stayed in the mountains, and his 2 daughters with him, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. And he stayed in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. He shouldn't have been afraid to stay in Zoar because God had told him what? I'll save you there. I don't care how bad it was, just outside that little city. But I also want us to grasp the overwhelming nature of this event on these individuals psychologically. Everything that they know has just gone up in smoke, literally. Their town, their home, their possessions, their friends, family members, they're gone. If you've never been in that situation where you're walking through your home after it's been destroyed, you can't really grasp the overwhelming nature of the feeling. But I'm telling you, that's where he was at. And that's where his daughters were at. And when we get to these places when we make decisions that emanate from fear instead of from the love of God, we make mistakes. And we do things that we would never, ever imagine that we would be willing to do. And I want that to sink in before we read the rest of this story, because we don't always appreciate and empathize with the daughters of Lot. But we should, because it could be us just as easy as it was them. We haven't been through what they went through. If we're not careful, if we don't continue to walk by faith instead of by sight, we make mistakes. We have bad judgment. There's a way which seems right to man, but that way ends in, what does God warn us? Destruction. I want you to know that what they end up doing here seems right to them at the time. And we even hear it in the record in terms of the way it's described. So they are up in a cave in the mountains, terrified, having witnessed the destruction of this entire valley and the death of millions of people, including people who are close to them. And the firstborn said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there's not a man on earth to come into us as in the manner of the earth." What happened to their future husbands, their betrothed? They were still in Sodom and they were destroyed. So here are these two girls who are planning their life and their future. They're supposed to be getting married and having children, and everything they know is gone. And they're in a cave, and the older one says, "You know what? Dad's not getting any younger, and there's not any men left. We're not going to find a husband. Just look around." "Let us make our father drink wine. Let us lie with him that we may preserve our family through our father." Her motive is to do what? Have descendants to the family. They just lost their entire family. By the way, do they know the extent of this? As far as they're concerned, what? This has happened everywhere. As far as they can see, everything that they can see has been destroyed. There's not any men. In order to preserve our family, we need to have. Now, there's a couple of lessons that I think are worth pulling out of this. First off, they know exactly what they're going to have to do to get their father to do this. Lot's a righteous man. Do you think Lot's going to go along? No, but what if we do this? Let's get him drunk. People want to try to argue for why it is okay for us to ingest alcohol. What did Noah do after the ark? He plants a vineyard, he makes wine, he gets drunk, and what happens? He takes all his clothes off in public where his son sees him. Now, the daughters of Lot know, hey, if we get him drunk, we can have relations with him and have a child with him. This isn't some secret, the effects of alcohol on people. What is the one thing that alcohol does to a man? It impairs what? Decision making. It takes away the part of your mind that says, no, that's not safe. No, that's not smart. No, That's not what I want to do. It takes that away. And so people who ordinarily wouldn't do something when they ingest alcohol are willing to do these things. That's what it does. That's the effect it has on the human mind. And they knew that. They didn't have to be chemists or doctors. These two unmarried women were smart enough to know the only way we can make this happen is if we get Dad drunk first, and then we can make it happen. So let's do that. Let's plan and plot to get him to drink wine, and then we can go in and preserve our family through our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. They got him drunk, and he did things that he would have never ordinarily done. And you can talk, by the way, to just about anybody in law enforcement, and what you'll find out is in about 90% of crimes, guess what is a factor? Alcohol. People that ordinarily wouldn't beat their wives start beating their wives. Parents that ordinarily wouldn't beat their children start beating their children. People shoot one another. People do all manner of bad things because their judgment is impaired. And that's exactly what happens here. And it doesn't happen once, it happens twice. They do it again the next night. Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. So they made the father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. And thus both daughters of Lot were with child by their father. And the firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And as for the younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ammi. He is the father of Ammon to this day. And so the nation of the Moabites and the Amorites, that's where they came from. This story is important because those two peoples become important in the struggle that the nation of Israel had. A lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of trouble. A lot of sin, ungodliness, bad choices get made when they're made out of fear, and especially if you couple with them some mind-altering chemical. So you have someone and they get in a squabble with their spouse, and they're in a bad mood, and they're in the dumps, and they go to the local bar and they drink a little bit, and is it any wonder that they end up committing adultery by the end of the night? You get mad at someone, at your boss. So you go on a drinking spree. You end up going back to the workplace and hurting people. Is it any wonder that those things happen in the world when these kinds of behaviors take place? When you take away the one thing in humanity that gives us any hope at all of doing the right thing is our ability to exercise control and to not act on every impulse that we have. And these substances, one effect on the human body is to remove that self-control. I have a hard enough time doing the right thing when I'm sober. I have a hard enough time holding my tongue and not saying things that I shouldn't say or not doing something that I shouldn't do. I don't need to make that even harder. I don't need to introduce something that would make me do things like this that are just repulsive to the sober mind. And I don't need to fear circumstances to the point that I'm willing to forget God and forget His promises. And that's What got him here? And by the way, it's very important we remember this. God himself said that Lot was a righteous man. God calls him righteous Lot. So this is not a story about what an unrighteous person does. This is a story about what a righteous man does if he allows himself to become consumed with his circumstances and allows himself to get drawn into worldly behaviors and things. I feel for them. I understand where they were coming from. They thought that they wasn't ever going to find another man. And if they were going to have children, this is the only way. But they didn't have all the information, did they? And that's the other thing that we ought to gain from this is the humility to realize we don't know the whole story. And so if I don't have all the information, can I make a good decision? Not without consulting the one who does have all the information. He has all the information. He knows the end from the beginning. That's why he told them, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. This is how you need to do it. He knew. They didn't. I got to stop. Appreciate your presence and your participation this evening.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea.